The Lakota woman invited the ranch cook on Christmas Eve, and the night changed everything. She pulled her coat tighter around herself, feeling the cold cut through her thin gloves. The ranch had always been a place she passed by, not a place she belonged to. Her family had lived nearby for generations, on the reservation, but they had never mixed much with the ranchers. Still, she knew their lives were connected in small ways: the milk they sold, the vegetables from her mother's garden, the occasional visit to town for supplies. But today felt different. Mary's breath came in little clouds as she walked toward the ranch house. She could smell smoke from the chimney and a faint scent of bread baking. Her stomach rumbled. Even though she had eaten lunch, the warm smell made her feel hungry. She hesitated at the doorway, her hand resting lightly on the wooden frame. Inside, the kitchen was busy. John, the ranch cook, moved back and forth between the stove and the counter. He was tall, with a broad frame that seemed to fill the kitchen, and his hands were large and strong, moving skillfully as he stirred the soup. He hummed a tune quietly, but there was a sadness in his eyes, a weariness that came from working long hours and being far from home. Mary took a slow step inside, trying not to startle him. John looked up and smiled politely, but it was a small smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Good evening," he said, his voice low but kind. Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, John. I hope you don't mind me stopping by." She noticed the small decorations on the counter: a tiny pine tree in a pot, a few candles, and a plate of cookies. Someone had made an effort to make it feel festive, even in the middle of the quiet winter night. She moved closer to the counter, curious about the soup. Steam rose in delicate swirls, carrying the smell of vegetables and herbs. She could see chunks of potatoes, carrots, and meat floating in the thick broth. "It smells amazing," she said. John smiled faintly. "It's just something simple for tonight. I like to keep it warm for anyone who wants a bowl." Most nights, she guessed, he ate alone, quietly, just like the rest of the ranch workers. She felt a sudden urge to do something different this time, to break the routine of silence that seemed to fill the ranch on holidays. She looked around, her eyes catching the soft glow of the candles. For a moment she imagined a table full of people, laughter filling the room, the air warm with conversation. Then she looked at John again, standing there with a ladle in his hand, waiting. "Would you like to join me for dinner tonight?" she asked softly. The words felt strange on her lips. She had never invited anyone into her home or life like this before, at least not someone from the ranch. It was not expected, it could even be awkward, but she said it anyway, letting kindness guide her. John blinked in surprise. He hadn't expected that. For a long moment he didn't answer. Then he smiled, a little wider this time. I would like that," he said. Mary's heart lifted. She didn't know why, but something about giving someone a small gift of company made her feel warm inside. She could see the tension in John's shoulders slowly release, as if the invitation had lifted a weight he had carried for weeks, maybe months. She motioned for him to sit at the table while she finished tidying up the small space near the stove. The snow continued to fall outside, covering the tracks in the yard, leaving the world quiet and peaceful. Mary thought about how strange it was that such a simple thing, inviting someone for a meal, could feel so meaningful. She remembered her own family's Christmases, crowded with cousins and laughter, full of stories and warmth. She remembered the smell of her mother's cooking, the sound of her father's deep laugh, the way everyone would gather around the fire, sharing jokes and gifts. She wanted to share just a small part of that with John, even if it was only for a few hours. As she set a few plates on the table and poured water into glasses, she noticed John watching her, still quietly, still polite, but now with a softer expression. He asked questions about the small decorations and the simple cookies, and she explained that she had made them herself, a little tradition her mother had taught her. "I always like to make something to share," she said. "Even if it's just a little, it feels good to give. It's what keeps people connected." But now, standing in this warm kitchen, she could see the simple truth. Everyone needed kindness, Everyone needed company, and sometimes all it took was a small invitation to change the evening, maybe even a life. The clock on the wall ticked quietly, counting down the moments until dinner. Outside, the sky darkened, and the snow reflected the dim light of the setting sun, making the whole world look like it was wrapped in silver. Mary thought about how Christmas Eve always seemed magical, even when life was hard. There was a feeling in the air that made people remember what really mattered: family, friendship, and the little joys that were easy to overlook in the rush of everyday life. John helped her carry the last of the dishes to the table. "It smells wonderful," he said again, but this time with genuine warmth. Mary laughed softly. "It's simple, but I hope it will be enough." Something that went beyond politeness, beyond tradition, beyond the usual boundaries that separated people. She thought about how life on the reservation and life on the ranch were different, yet so similar. People worked hard, cared for their families, and sometimes felt lonely, especially during the holidays. She realized that kindness did not need to respect boundaries. It only needed a willing heart. Mary looked at John, who was now slicing some bread and placing it on a plate. The warmth from the oven filled the kitchen, mingling with the smell of the soup and the faint scent of pine from the small tree by the window. Everything seemed to slow down, and the outside world felt far away, as if the snow itself had paused to watch this small moment unfold. She took a deep breath, feeling the quiet happiness of being able to do something good, something simple, yet meaningful. She didn't know what the rest of the evening would bring, but she knew that this moment, this act of sharing, this breaking of routine, was already special. And in that quiet kitchen, on the edge of the snowy plains, Mary felt that Christmas Eve had already begun to work its gentle magic. A night that had started like any other had already started to change everything, starting with one small, brave invitation. After Mary's invitation, the kitchen seemed warmer, not just from the stove but from a quiet sense of connection. John moved carefully, but there was a light in his eyes now that hadn't been there before. The air was filled with the soft aroma of the soup, fresh bread, and a hint of cinnamon from the cookies. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white, but inside, the room felt alive with a gentle warmth. Mary set the last plate on the table and pulled out 2 chairs. She gestured toward them, and John nodded, sitting down slowly as if trying to take in the reality of the invitation. "I can't remember the last time I spent Christmas Eve with someone," John said quietly, breaking the silence. His voice carried a weight of loneliness, though he tried to keep it light. Mary looked at him, surprised and moved. She had not realized how isolated he must feel, working long hours at the ranch, away from family and friends. "I'm glad you're here," she said. "Sometimes even a small meal together can make the night feel different." She felt a strange, comforting feeling in her chest, a mix of relief, happiness, and hope. She realized that inviting someone into her space, into her life, could have a bigger impact than she imagined. They started to eat slowly, savoring the simple food. Mary had made sure the soup had enough vegetables, meat, and potatoes to be filling, and the bread was warm and soft. She had also brought out a small plate of cookies, shaped like stars and trees, carefully decorated with sugar. John took one, smiling. "These are wonderful," he said. "Did you make them yourself?" "Even if it's just a little, it feels good to share." "It's been a long time since I felt that kind of joy," he admitted softly. Mary nodded, understanding. She knew that life could be hard and lonely, even when surrounded by people. "Sometimes we forget how small things can matter," she said. "A simple dinner, a little conversation, it can make a night feel special." She spoke about winters on the reservation, when the snow covered everything, and children would build small snow forts and slide down the hills. She shared memories of her mother teaching her to bake bread, and how the house would smell warm and sweet while the family laughed and sang. She even told John about small lessons her father taught her, like the importance of kindness, patience, and noticing the people around you. John listened closely, nodding and smiling. At times he laughed softly, remembering his own experiences. He told Mary about the first time he worked at the ranch, how nervous he had been, and how he had learned to cook for dozens of people at once. He shared stories about other ranch workers, the routines, and the hard work that made life there both tiring and rewarding. Each story seemed to build a bridge between them, connecting two lives that had never crossed paths deeply before. After a while, the conversation moved from memories to hopes and dreams. Mary spoke about her wish to help the younger children on the reservation, to teach them small skills like cooking, gardening, and caring for animals. She wanted them to feel capable and confident, to know that small actions could make a difference. John spoke about his own dreams of one day owning a small bakery, a place where people could come together, enjoy warm food, and feel at home. He smiled as he spoke, the first real sparkle of excitement Mary had seen in his eyes that evening. The snow outside had grown heavier, turning the landscape into a quiet, sparkling world. Mary glanced at the window and noticed the way the light from the kitchen reflected on the snow, making the room glow softly. "It's beautiful tonight," she said. "The snow makes everything feel magical, doesn't it?" She realized that her decision to reach out to John was not just about sharing a meal. It was about connection, about breaking the isolation that people sometimes felt, and about remembering the real meaning of the season. After dinner, Mary suggested they clear the table and move toward the fireplace. She had a small fire going, the flames flickering and casting dancing shadows across the walls. The room felt even warmer now, a comforting contrast to the cold outside. They sat down with mugs of warm tea, letting the heat from the fire seep into their bones. "I didn't expect tonight to feel like this," John admitted. "I thought it would be just another quiet Christmas Eve, but sitting here, talking, it feels like a gift." It's amazing how small actions can change an evening. Even the tiniest gesture, sharing food, a story, or even just time, can make someone feel less alone. John shared stories of his own family, of friends he had made in other towns, and of the simple pleasures that had kept him going through lonely times. With each story, they felt closer, understanding each other in ways that went beyond words. At one point, John looked at Mary with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said, "I've worked at many places in my life. I've met many people. But rarely has someone invited me in with such warmth and kindness. It's special." For the first time that evening, Mary felt that the world was truly at peace. As the night grew darker, John and Mary grew more comfortable. They shared small jokes, smiled at each other's stories, and even discussed simple things like the taste of the soup, the softness of the bread, and the decorations on the table. Every detail of the evening, no matter how small, seemed to carry meaning. Mary noticed that John's shoulders, once tense, were now relaxed, and his face reflected a calm she had not seen before. Finally, Mary reached for a small plate of cookies she had saved. "These are just a little treat," she said, handing one to John. "A small way to make the evening sweeter. I'll remember tonight for a long time." The fire crackled softly, and the snow continued to fall outside. Mary and John sat together, feeling a connection that neither had expected but both welcomed. There was a sense of hope, a sense of peace, and a feeling that this evening would not be forgotten. It was more than a meal, it was a beginning, a small act of warmth that had the power to grow into something lasting. As Mary looked at John, she realized that sometimes the smallest choices, like inviting someone to dinner, could create the biggest changes. That night she had offered company and kindness, and in return she had received friendship, gratitude, and a reminder of the beauty of human connection. Outside, the snow continued to fall, quiet and soft, covering the world in white. Inside, the kitchen glowed with light, warmth, and laughter. And Mary knew that this Christmas Eve, simple and ordinary as it seemed, had already begun to change everything. As the evening went on, the warmth in the kitchen grew, not just from the fire or the oven, but from the growing connection between Mary and John. They had shared stories and laughter for hours, but now a different kind of conversation began, one that was quieter, deeper. Outside, the snow continued to fall, piling high on the roofs and fields, turning the world into a soft, white blanket. The cold wind howled at times, but inside the ranch kitchen there was a feeling of calm, of safety, and of understanding. John leaned back in his chair, looking at the fire. "You know," he said quietly, "I've never really had a Christmas like this. Always working, always busy, and sometimes alone. I thought that was just how life was going to be, but tonight feels different. Life can be busy and difficult, but moments like this make it worth living. I never thought someone like me would be welcomed into a place like this, but you've made me feel seen. Everyone belongs somewhere, and sometimes it just takes one person to show that they care. Tonight, you belong here, at least for a while." She realized that the challenge of life was not just the work, the distance, or the cold. It was the loneliness that people carried inside them. For some, even when surrounded by others, that feeling never went away. She wanted to do something more, to offer more than just a meal and conversation. But she also knew she had to respect his space, to allow him to find comfort in his own time. As they sat quietly, the sound of the fire and the soft ticking of the clock were the only noises. Mary's eyes wandered around the kitchen, taking in the small details she had not noticed before, the little decorations on the windowsill, the way the light reflected off the polished wooden table, the steam rising from the teacups. Everything seemed peaceful, almost magical. She realized that life often gave these small, perfect moments, and it was up to people to notice them, to cherish them. John broke the silence with a question. "Mary, can I ask you something?" "I don't know exactly, I suppose. I just felt that it was the right thing to do. It seemed like a small act that could mean a lot. I noticed that you were alone and I thought maybe you'd like company. Sometimes that's all it takes, someone noticing, someone caring." "It's strange how something so small can feel so big," he said. "A meal, a few words, a bit of kindness. It's changed my night, maybe even my life." She wanted to do more, to help people feel seen and valued. But she also knew that each small act was important, that each gesture could ripple outward in ways that were not immediately visible. The conversation turned to memories of family and childhood. Mary shared stories of her siblings, the games they played in the snow, the songs they sang by the fireplace, and the traditions they kept alive even in difficult times. John listened intently, occasionally nodding or laughing softly. Then he spoke about his own past, the family he had grown up with, the struggles he had faced, and the dreams he had almost given up on. "I've always worked hard," John said quietly, "but hard work isn't everything. It's the people you share life with that matter most. And for a long time I didn't have anyone. But tonight I feel like I belong somewhere." She had seen it in many people on the reservation, in families struggling to stay connected, in children longing for attention and care. She realized that life's biggest challenges were often invisible, the challenges of the heart, the ones that people carried quietly, silently, and alone. For the first time, Mary felt a deeper sense of purpose. She wanted to make a difference, not just for John, but for others like him, people who were working hard, living far from family, and feeling isolated during the holidays. She thought about ways she could bring the community together, how she could reach out and offer small acts of kindness that might have lasting impact. But for now, she focused on the present, on the quiet, magical evening they were sharing. John glanced at the window, watching the snowflakes fall. "It's amazing how quiet it is out there," he said. "Everything is covered in white and it feels like the world has paused. I almost wish it could stay like this forever." It's the kind of quiet that makes you notice what really matters. The world is busy, noisy, and sometimes cruel, but nights like this remind us that peace exists, and it's up to us to create it, even if only for a little while. Mary told John about the elders on the reservation, the lessons they had passed down, and the way people helped each other quietly without expectation. John spoke about his travels, the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned about patience, perseverance, and kindness. At one point, John hesitated, then asked, "Mary, do you think people can really change? I mean, not just themselves, but how they live, how they connect with others." He looked at Mary with a new respect, a quiet admiration. "I think I understand now," he said. "Tonight isn't just a meal or a conversation. It's a reminder that people can care, that life can be different, that maybe it's never too late to feel at home." She had not expected to feel so moved, but she realized that the night was more than just a simple Christmas Eve dinner. It was a night of connection, a night of understanding, a night that would stay with both of them for a long time. She felt grateful for the opportunity to make a difference, even in a small way, and she hoped that John felt the same. As the fire crackled and the snow continued to fall outside, they both sat in comfortable silence, letting the warmth and quiet fill the room. Mary thought about the challenges of life, the loneliness, the distance from family, the feeling of being invisible, and how they could be eased with simple gestures of care. She realized that the hardest battles were often invisible, fought quietly within hearts, and that courage was not always loud. Sometimes it was the courage to reach out, to invite someone in, to share a meal and a story. John finally spoke, his voice soft but certain. "Mary, tonight has reminded me that there is hope. That even when life is hard, and even when we feel alone, someone's kindness can change everything. Thank you for this." The night grew deeper, and the snow outside thickened, covering the world in silence and beauty. Inside there was laughter, conversation, and a sense of peace. Mary realized that even the smallest actions, a kind word, a shared story, a simple meal, could have a ripple effect that lasted far beyond a single evening. By the time the clock approached midnight, both Mary and John felt a sense of calm and contentment. They had shared a night that neither would forget, a night that had brought light to the darkness, warmth to the cold, and hope to hearts that had needed it most. And even though the challenges of life remained outside the kitchen walls, inside, they had created something lasting, a connection that would endure, a reminder that kindness and understanding could truly change everything. The night had grown deeper, and the fire in the kitchen cast long, warm shadows across the walls. Mary and John had been talking for hours, sharing memories, dreams, and quiet laughter. Yet, as the evening continued, Mary felt there was still something unspoken between them, a small tension that needed attention. She realized that while kindness and conversation had created a connection, real trust and understanding were built through deeper honesty. John sat quietly for a moment, staring into his teacup. His face was calm, but Mary sensed the thoughts racing in his mind. She decided to break the silence. "John," she said gently, "I know it hasn't been easy for you. Living far from your family, working long hours, feeling like you don't belong. It's a heavy burden to carry alone." There was a vulnerability there that he rarely showed to anyone. "You're right," he said softly. "It has been hard. More than I realized, maybe. I've always tried to be strong, to focus on work, to keep my feelings inside. But tonight made me see that I can't do everything alone. But sometimes we need to let others help us. That doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. Even here at the ranch, I've never felt completely part of things. I cook, I work, I do my job, but I never really felt accepted. Not until tonight. Maybe you just needed someone to remind you." John felt a weight lift from his shoulders, a burden he had carried alone for years. After a moment, he spoke again, his voice more steady. "Mary, I don't think I've ever felt this way before. Not like I belong, not like I'm truly seen. You've changed that for me tonight. I don't know how to thank you. The gift is in sharing time, sharing kindness, and being present. That's all anyone really needs." Mary thought about the power of connection, about how a single act of generosity could ripple outward, changing lives in ways that were not always immediately visible. She realized that she had done more than offer a meal. She had opened a door, and John had stepped through it. As the clock neared midnight, Mary suggested they step outside for a moment to look at the snow. The winter night was still and calm, the moonlight reflecting off the fresh snow, making the world sparkle. John hesitated at first, then followed her, and together they walked to the edge of the ranch yard. The cold air was sharp against their faces, but it felt invigorating. John looked around, taking in the silence, the soft white hills and the stars shining clearly above. "It's beautiful," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "I haven't seen anything like this in years. Like the weight I've been carrying is finally easing, even if just a little." They walked slowly back to the kitchen, their footsteps soft in the snow. Mary set her coat aside, and John did the same. The warmth from the fire welcomed them back, wrapping them in a cocoon of light and comfort. John sat down, feeling more at ease than he had in years. Mary poured them each another cup of tea, the steam curling in the soft glow of the firelight. "I think this night has taught me something important," John said, his voice thoughtful. "That life isn't just about work or routines or being strong. It's about connection, about letting people in, about sharing kindness when it matters most. One meal, one conversation, one gesture of care, it can change everything. I want to be someone who reaches out, instead of staying isolated. One person's kindness can ripple outward in ways we can't always see." Together they began to imagine ways to bring more warmth, more connection, and more care to those around them. At one point, John reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. "I don't know if this is silly," he said, "but I wrote down a few ideas. Things I can do, ways I can help, ways I can be more connected. I wanted to share them with you." "You've already started," she said, smiling. "Tonight is proof that even small actions can create change. You're taking the next steps, and that's what matters most. Tonight has shown me what's possible." The night had begun as a simple gesture, but it had become something transformative, a turning point, a moment that would ripple outward in ways neither of them could fully measure. Outside, the snow continued to fall softly, covering the world in white. The silence of the night was peaceful, almost sacred. Inside, the fire crackled, the tea mugs warmed their hands, and the kitchen was filled with a quiet, profound sense of hope. Mary realized that this night, this turning point, was not just about one person or one meal. It was about the power of human connection, the courage to reach out, and the willingness to accept kindness in return. As the clock neared midnight, they sat together, reflecting on the evening, feeling the weight of loneliness lifting, replaced by the warmth of understanding, friendship, and hope. They knew that life outside this kitchen would continue to have its challenges, but the night had shown them that even in the coldest, loneliest moments, kindness could light the way and connection could heal the heart. The next morning, Mary woke to a world blanketed in fresh snow. The ranch looked peaceful, almost magical, as the sunlight reflected off the white fields. She could hear birds chirping softly in the distance, and the crisp winter air carried a quiet calm. The kitchen smelled faintly of the soup and bread from the night before, a comforting reminder of the previous evening's warmth. Mary felt a deep sense of satisfaction as she moved around the house, preparing breakfast. She thought about how one night had already begun to change so much, not just for John, but for herself and maybe for the ranch as well. John arrived in the kitchen a little later, carrying a bag with some supplies he had brought for breakfast. His expression was lighter, more relaxed than Mary had ever seen. There was a softness in his eyes, a quiet joy that had not been there before. "Good morning, Mary," he said, smiling. "I slept better than I have in weeks. I want to keep that feeling alive, not just for myself, but for others too." As they ate breakfast, John spoke about his plans. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what we talked about last night, about reaching out, about helping others. I want to start small, maybe visit some neighbors, help a few people who might be lonely, even cook meals for those who can't cook for themselves. I think it's the right thing to do." She had seen people grow before, but witnessing this change in John was special. "That's wonderful," she said. "Small actions can create big changes, and by doing this, you'll inspire others too." John worked with a new energy, helping not just in the kitchen but with small tasks around the house. His interactions with the ranchers were warmer, friendlier. Even the way he carried himself had changed, more confident, more open, more present. In the afternoon, Mary suggested they take a walk to check on the nearby families. The snow was deep, but the path was clear enough to walk. John agreed, and together they moved through the quiet winter landscape. As they walked, they talked about the people in the community, about the families who might be struggling, about the children who could use a kind word or a simple act of help. They first visited Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman who lived alone on the edge of the reservation. She was surprised to see John at her door carrying a small basket of bread and cookies. "John, what a wonderful surprise," she said, her eyes lighting up. "And Mary, of course, come in, come in." Thompson took the basket, her hands trembling slightly. "You don't know how much this means," she said softly. "I've been so lonely this season. Thank you both." The loneliness, the weariness, the sense of being an outsider, these were all gone, replaced by genuine care and connection. For the first time, she saw him as more than a cook at the ranch. She saw him as a part of the community, as someone who could bring warmth to others. As they continued their walk, they stopped at a few more homes. They delivered small gifts, shared stories, and offered help where it was needed. Each interaction seemed to lift John's spirit even higher. He laughed easily, listened attentively, and spoke with warmth and respect. Mary felt a sense of pride and hope. The change that had begun on Christmas Eve was spreading outward, touching lives beyond just their own. By late afternoon, they returned to the ranch, tired but fulfilled. John set down his bag and looked at Mary with gratitude. "I can't believe how much one evening can change things," he said. "Not just for me, but for everyone we visited. I feel like a part of something bigger now, something important." One small action can ripple outward, touching many lives. You've started something wonderful, John, and it will continue as long as you keep caring. The ranch felt warmer, more connected, more like a community than a workplace. Mary watched as his confidence and joy grew, and she knew that the night they had shared was the catalyst for this change. One afternoon, a few weeks after Christmas, the ranch held a small celebration. Families and neighbors gathered to share food, stories, and laughter. John was at the center, helping to organize the meal, ensuring everyone felt welcome. Mary noticed how naturally he moved among the people, offering help and attention without needing recognition. The same man who had been quiet and reserved on Christmas Eve was now a source of warmth and encouragement for the entire community. During a quiet moment, John approached Mary. "I just want to say thank you again," he said. "Not just for inviting me that night, but for showing me that life can be better, that connection matters, that kindness is powerful. I won't forget this ever. That even when life is hard, we can create moments of light and warmth. That's what matters most." It had sparked something far greater, a chain of kindness, care, and community that would continue long after the snow melted and the seasons changed. John moved among the people, offering help, sharing a joke, and listening attentively. Mary noticed how many people approached him, grateful for his support and friendship. She felt a sense of quiet pride, knowing that a single act of courage to reach out, to invite someone into your life, could ripple outward in ways that touched many hearts. As the evening drew to a close, Mary and John stepped outside. The snow had begun to melt slightly under the afternoon sun, and the air was crisp and clean. They looked out over the ranch, feeling the peace and connection that had grown from a simple Christmas Eve dinner. "I never imagined it could be like this," John said, his voice soft but full of wonder. "I feel part of something real now, something meaningful, and it all started with one small act of kindness. One small action, one moment of courage, one decision to care. It can grow into something far bigger than we ever imagined. Mary realized that life was full of opportunities to make a difference, to offer kindness, and to connect with others. The night had shown her that even a small gesture could transform not just an evening, but a life and the lives of many others. John turned to her, smiling. "I'll carry this with me, Mary, always. I'll continue to share kindness, to reach out, and to be part of something bigger. You've changed my life, and I'll never forget it." It had reminded them both of the power of human connection, the importance of kindness, and the beauty of giving without expectation. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the snowy fields, Mary and John walked back to the ranch house. Inside, the fire still glowed softly, a reminder of the night that had begun it all. They knew that life would continue to have challenges, but the connection they had formed, the kindness they had shared, and the hope they had created would stay with them forever. The story of that Christmas Eve became something more than just a memory. It became a reminder, a lesson, and an inspiration. It showed that one act of courage, one decision to include someone, and one night of sharing could change everything. And in the quiet warmth of the ranch kitchen, Mary and John knew that they had discovered something precious: the lasting power of connection, kindness, and the simple human need to belong.